and streaming media magazine about metadata.
Yep, and metadata, like I said in the article, is one of those things that's so geeky that people stop reading after the first 3 paragraphs, or sometimes even the first 3 sentences. So the fact that you made it
let's
through.
Sex it up. Let's get geeky.
So I got a question
Geeky's
though.
sexy.
Did you actually make it through the entire article?
I read the whole article.
Wow. And you didn't fall asleep?
I did not.
Okay, so that's just proof that metadata is not nearly as boring as some people think it is. So let's sex it up.
It's like, I like Brussels sprouts too, so
yeah,
they're good for you.
All right. I live in the South. Collard greens is something I haven't been able to get used to quite
Really?
yet. But
I love collard greens.
Really?
I love
like
kale, collard greens,
I like
Brussels
spinach,
sprouts,
but I can't do the other. So, all right.
Swiss chard.
So how do we sex up metadata?
Chris, any ideas? Well, what are give me some of the, where are we in the world of metadata
Sure.
right now? What's snapshot in time?
So let me step back about a decade. One of the problems that we have had and we still have yet to fully address is, as you go through the production process, there's metadata, for instance, on the camera here, time code, time of day, et cetera, et cetera. Some of that stuff transfers into the editing system, into the bins when you're logging. Some of it transfers onto the timeline, but a lot of it gets lost at multiple points through the process. And then if you output at the end of the production on tape or DVD, all of that metadata gets lost. So a big problem we've had is we make metadata at multiple points through the production process and through the distribution process, but we lose more metadata than we make. And so how do we get to the point where that stuff, if it's not automated, is at least carried through the production process to the end? And to me, it's a known problem that we've had for years. But online video is one of those newer technologies that allows people to really think about the fact that if they have that metadata from early on in the production process, that it might actually help in monetizing things such as the ability to search. So if, let's say you're shooting an indie film and you have a particular actress that's in 13 of the 25 scenes, more than likely it's in the script as you've written it. It's also at some point in your nonlinear editing system, and if that can be carried forward, what it does for me as a consumer is if I like that particular actress, I can say, just show me the scenes with her. I don't really care about the rest of the movie. All I want to do is see those 13 scenes, and then you can charge me a premium to do that. Or you can charge me a premium to say, I want that actress from all the movies that she's been in, and I only want those scenes, so I want to make a custom reel, and I'm willing to pay $25 to have, this particular thing. So that, to me,
it would be every 13-year-old boy's dream come true.
it would be, and
that's the market.
That totally is, and it's applicability of metadata to me that's the sexy part. Yeah. It's not making metadata to begin with, because that's
Tim, I'm already aroused. We're talking about some sexy stuff here.
There we go. We've moved it to that. So to me, the snapshot is we're starting to address those problems of losing metadata because we're starting to see the value. And what's happening, if you take a look at, say, Adobe Story, the beta that's out from Adobe, what they're doing is as you generate the script, it generates information about each of the characters. And, oh, by the way, if you use a version of On Location, and they won't yet say what it is because they're not publicly saying it, but if you use a version of On Location, it will create a shot list off of what you created in the script. So it's looking to make the production job easier. I think at this show, people are less concerned about that, and they're more concerned about the fact that they're having to key metadata back into the process when they try to do search, to make content searchable.
Something like Adobe Story, the assumption there is that there is a script that you can pull in,
right?
But there are also solutions coming to market where it can actually analyze vocal audio and
interestingly, we've had those companies around for well over a decade. I did a market analytics project for a company back in 1999 who was convinced at that point that everybody would run their video through these indexing systems. That company, interestingly, is out of business, but some of the market landscape competitors that I looked at are still in business and doing very well. The problem with those systems is somebody has to think to put their video through it. So what you really want is to kind of integrate that into the content delivery network so that when you push content up, you not only transcode it, but you also analyze it. Because you're right, they do speech to text, they do logo recognition, facial recognition. The speech to text may only be about 60% accurate, but at the end of the day, people are typing in keywords to search, they're not typing in full sentences to search for. And that means that the value of those products is growing significantly because, again, it keeps somebody from having to manually sit there and type stuff in.
So what's the market for this? I mean, it seems like it's, as people are realizing the value of metadata and making their content discoverable, there's going to be a huge opportunity for these companies. It seems like it's sort of starting, but it's not sizable in any way yet.
You know, I think there's three basic markets. One is, what's the market for making search a little easier? And that's limited to the search companies themselves, and there are technologies that those search companies are using to extract information. The second market is entertainment, like we talked about, where I want to go find something. And I think Mark Witten's presentation this morning on the Xbox, he was saying, you know, we need to move beyond just flipping up through an EPG. We need to have some form of search capability. So obviously that needs metadata. And you'll see companies capitalizing strictly on creating a better GUI or electronic program guide, because when you get a plethora of content, you have to have a way to get to it. And if the metadata is the way to get to it, then we'll probably see companies do both the EPGs, and we'll see something happen like what GraceNote did back when they were CDDB, where they would allow you, when you put a disk into iTunes, if it wasn't correct, you could send up a correction, and that would be added into the system. And then the third area, I think, is corporate training and lectures, because that content is highly unscripted and really long. And I don't know about you, but I would have paid serious money as a student to be able to have a system just find me the basic points that the professor was talking about so that I could watch the hour lecture in 15 minutes. That would have been worth some money. Now, I was a college student, so I may not have had a lot of money to do it, but at the end of the day, those speech-to-text systems and the ones that synchronize PowerPoint slides where it reads the optical character recognition, it's a very solvable problem in a very short period of time, and people who use the systems to get training and trainers who put stuff into the systems, I think will pay money to have that done for them automatically, as opposed to having to sit there and manually enter it. At the end of the day, they probably won't manually enter it because that's not their job. Their job is to create it, not to help other people find it.
Do you have an example of a content company that you think's been doing a good job of using these types of tools that are available and either monetizing it or increasing their audience because of it?
So what's interesting about the content creation companies, content distribution companies, when we talk about traditional Hollywood, even indie, they've seen the value of metadata for several years, and they're building internal libraries so that they can find the content themselves. And one example that I used for a white paper a couple years ago was back when I was a videographer. If you walked into my editing suite and said, hey, I watched this video that you shot, and like 2 minutes into that video there was this bird that flew through, and I want to use that shot for another video that I'm doing. What I would probably do is I'd turn around and I'd say, well, you know what? I think it's in that Beta SP tape up in the top left-hand corner. It has the blue dot on the side of it. If you wind down about 20 minutes, you can find it. Because I could visually represent to myself where I had put it. You throw all that stuff on a computer, and suddenly it's like, well, the video file was on the desktop last week. Where did it go?
It's like with music. I mean, my music collection.
Right. Exactly.
My when I had CDs, or I DJ'd a lot, so I had vinyl. I could see something that I know what that is.
You could rapidly go get that. And with iTunes, it's almost like you have to replicate it to 3 iTunes systems to have one to play, one queued up, and then one to go find stuff. So what's happened is those companies have figured out that they need metadata to find their content within their repositories. But what's really interesting is they've perceived the value of the workflow being better, but they've not really yet perceived the value of putting that out to allow all that deep metadata to be accessible by the end user. So there really aren't examples in the moment yet in the true content space where those internal metadata systems have moved out. And this is another piece of the snapshot. The reason that they haven't moved out is the way that metadata is aggregated now is you have a video file and you have the file name, and that file name references off to a separate database that has all the metadata in it. So if you were going to expose portions of that metadata, you'd have to expose most of the database out to the rest of the world, and a lot of IT people would be very uncomfortable with that. So another place we really need to address is if I have a video file that I'm going to make available to the rest of the world, how much of that metadata that sits over in this database can be pulled over and embedded into the final file, rather than having to have access to metadata here and access to video files here. If we can solve that problem of kind of portability of metadata, then I think you'll see a lot more content companies extract certain information and drop it into video files that are available to you and I to see. So.
Well, Tim, I am now very excited about metadata. I appreciate it.
And you're not 13 years old, so don't use my example.
I won't.
All right, good deal.
All right.
And hopefully, 2 years from now, we'll have solved these problems. I think we're just on the cusp now of people recognizing that those problems even exist.
And companies who have tools to help solve them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good.